What is up, ladies and gentlemen, NBA ball knowers and non-ball knowers? Thanks for clicking on another episode of Break the Silence. I am your host, Cyborg, and we just got done watching an awesome basketball game between two super exciting basketball teams in the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Cleveland Cavaliers. Tonight, the Minnesota Timberwolves took the game 131 to 122, a game that was very back and forth, a tight game in the first half, Cavs having a little bit of a lead, Minnesota storming back, taking a huge lead into the third quarter, and Cleveland made a run to start the fourth quarter, creating a pretty close game in crunch time, but ultimately the Minnesota Timberwolves got it done. Minnesota could use a win like this, obviously. A lot going on in Minnesota in the last 36 hours, so big win for the Minnesota Timberwolves, a team that moved up to fifth in the standings in the Western Conference, and they're knocking on the door of the fourth, third, second seed. So they're right there in the mix of where we thought they'd be coming in to this NBA season. So tonight, we're going to get into a little bit about the game. Anthony Edwards becoming the third youngest player, to reach 10,000 points, right behind LeBron James and Kevin Durant. And then we're going to get into a little bit more overarching, talk about both teams and kind of how they performed this season, because it's actually very interesting. As I was researching this game in particular and these two teams, they have a lot of things in common, including some of the way that their teams are structured. Their offenses are 6th and 7th in the league, respectfully, and they're both right there. Teams that you're hoping take that next step, maybe reach an NBA Finals, who've been kind of knocking on that door the last couple of seasons. Before we do, take a second to subscribe to the channel. It would help greatly. We are going to be grinding in NBA content coming up. We love hoops. We love to break it down, love discussion. So if you have any thoughts, let me know in the comments. I know there's a lot of Timberwolves fans out there super excited about their basketball team and their young stud. Actually, not as young anymore, kind of becoming a veteran in the NBA, and Anthony Edwards. So let's start with this. So tonight, the Timberwolves won 131-122. Behind, honestly, a really, really good game from Julius Randle, a solid game from Anthony Edwards. Randle had 28, Anthony Edwards had 25. Like I said, in the first half, the Cavs were up by 4 points going into halftime, and in the third quarter, the Timberwolves won that quarter 43-22. They absolutely exploded. Julius Randle was doing work, Anthony Edwards was doing work, but one of, I think, the best players in tonight's game was Jaden McDaniels. And I think that that's kind of one of the key differences between these two basketball teams, because on both teams you have two good guards. Obviously, Donovan Mitchell, Anthony Edwards, two of the best guards in the entire NBA. Donovan Mitchell right now is 4th in the NBA in scoring at 29.8 points a game. Anthony Edwards at 29.3 points per game, 7th in the NBA is scoring. Anthony Edwards, obviously, better defender, but two teams led by very good shooting guards, and I'd say more traditional shooting guards. We don't always have a lot of those in the NBA nowadays. You have a lot of guys who kind of play, just guard. They kind of do both. They handle the basketball, that kind of stuff. These two guys handle the basketball, but they are very physical players, explosive players, and can score at a high clip when they're on. But the thing that the Minnesota Timberwolves have, and that I think showed tonight that the Cleveland Cavaliers don't, is that small forward position. I think Jaden McDaniels obviously is one of the best perimeter defenders in the entire NBA, and tonight he was 11 of 14 from the field, 26 points, 3 of 4 from 3. When the Minnesota Timberwolves can get this kind of production from Julius Randle, from Jaden McDaniels, you were talking about a very scary basketball team, because Dante DiVincenzo's had a really good year, and Anthony Edwards on the season, I was just pulling up his season stats, shooting 41% from the three-point range, and that's where we've really seen Anthony Edwards improve over the years. As he started his career at a 33% shooter, then kind of became a 35% shooter. Last year was 39, and this year all the way up to 41. So you're talking about a player that has seen a steady improvement from the three-point line, and with that, obviously, the rest of his efficiency has increased, his points per game has gone up. And that's where Anthony Edwards has taken that next step into becoming, one of those top players in the NBA. And when you get into a playoff series, if you have a guy like that, you absolutely have a chance. Now, where both of these teams struggle a little bit is bench scoring. And you can see it kind of on a night-to-night basis. The Timberwolves are 21st in the NBA in bench scoring, and the Cavs are 27th. So once you get past the starting lineup, sometimes it doesn't feel like you're getting a whole lot of punch. The Timberwolves have a great bench player, Naz Reid. Obviously, Mike Conley's a little older. And then, Bones Highland, Jalen Clark played some tonight, but those guys don't get quite as much run as those other guys I was discussing. But the starting lineup for the Timberwolves had 28 from Julius Randle, 26 from Jaden McDaniels, 11 from Rudy Gobert, 22 from Dante DiVincenzo, and 25 from Anthony Edwards. Excuse me. On the other hand, the Cavs had 30 from Donovan Mitchell, 19 from Evan Mobley, 16 from Darius Garland, 11 from Jared Allen, and only 4 from their fifth guy in Craig Porter Jr. Now off the bench, Sam Merrill was cooking. Shot the lights out of the basketball, hit 5 threes tonight. So he was really good. Like I kind of said, the problem with the Cavs is they expected DeAndre Hunter to step into that fifth starter role, and he kind of hasn't done that to the level that they hoped. They also got Max Strus before last season, and that also hasn't given them the jump that they really were hoping for. So like I said, the Minnesota Timberwolves, 7th in the NBA in offense. They're 11th in the NBA in turnovers. Cavs, ironically, are 10th. So they're right there in both of those rankings. Where the Timberwolves kind of set themselves apart is defensively. The Timberwolves are 6th in the NBA in defensive rating, and they're way better in clutch winning percentage. So the NBA defines clutch as within 5 points in the final 5 minutes of a game. Tonight did hit those parameters. Timberwolves, we saw, get another win. Cavs are 25th in the NBA in clutch win percentage. So in a lot of tight games, we've seen the Cavaliers struggle. It kind of showed its hand again tonight. Now, obviously, they were trying to make a big comeback. But in those crunch time execution, I think that's where Anthony Edwards is really, really effective. And he's the 3rd leading scorer in the entire NBA in the clutch on a points per game basis in those situations. So there's few guys in the entire league that you trust more in that end of game clutch situation than Anthony Edwards. And you see him close out a lot of basketball games. And tonight they just felt like they were playing with so much synergy. Him, Julius Randle, Jaden McDaniels, all those guys felt like they were very much on the same wavelength. And then you have Rudy Gobert, who year after year is one of the best defenders in the NBA. I know he's so heavily criticized, really too overly criticized that it often frustrates me as just a fan of basketball, a fan of the NBA. Rudy Gobert obviously has not developed quite as much in the offensive end of the court that you would hope for, but you're still talking about one of the best defensive players really of all time, and a guy who I believe right now is 2nd in betting odds to win another defensive player of the year, right behind Chet Holmgren, who, is always an injury liability. And the Timberwolves defense is 6th in the NBA. Now, obviously, Jaden McDaniels and Anthony Edwards, both very good defensive players. So they have other good players on the court, but Rudy Gobert really spearheads and, is the center point of that defense. So tonight, the game was all about that third quarter. And if you think back to some of those great Warriors teams, when they were really elite in 2016, 17, they talked so much about that third quarter, and that's where the Warriors really dominated basketball games. A lot of times, that can be the quarter that has huge swings one direction or the other. You come out of halftime, and you might be down a few points, and then you go on a huge run and take a huge lead going into the fourth quarter, or vice versa. You feel like you fell apart in that third quarter, but great teams are great in the third quarter and great late in the fourth. Because obviously coming out of half, you get your starters back in the game, you refocus, you see kind of how the game's playing out, you make some adjustments, and you come out there, and that's where great teams really make their money. And that's how the Timberwolves played tonight. And like I said, that moves them up to the 5th seed in the Western Conference. and they're only actually fourth seed in the Western Conference. I apologize. They're a half game behind the Denver Nuggets and a game and a half behind the San Antonio Spurs. Both teams who have dealt with injury issues to Wemby and Nikola Jokic. So I can see the Timberwolves passing both of those teams as you go into the playoffs. So just for a second, I want to talk about Anthony Edwards and how incredible it is him becoming the third youngest player to reach 10,000 points. When you think about players in the history of the league, obviously LeBron and KD's elite company to be in, and some of the older players played a little longer in college. So you're talking about a lot of players today, but you think about the prolific scorers in the NBA. Anthony Edwards' ability to step in this league from year one, average 20 points a game in his first season in the NBA, and steadily improve, but be a really, really solid and a really, at this point, be superstar top 5 player in the NBA right now, has been highly impressive and shows a lot about Anthony Edwards' work ethic. He was a player that admittedly I was a little worried about coming out of college because, they talked a lot about some of his quotes. He said he didn't like watching basketball, things like that. You always, kind of put your guard up when a player says that they don't really like to watch basketball. But Anthony Edwards has proven that he has that dog in him, really. I mean, he works incredibly hard. He plays at a high level, and he's shown so much improvement. He's an elite competitor, and we need guys like that in the league. He talks trash. He interacts with the crowd, with the fans, and he just puts on a show, and he loves to do it. You can tell he loves the sport. His mid-range game is elite. I talked about his three-point percentage raising year after year. His pull-up jump shot, one of the best in the game, and obviously you're talking about one of the top couple athletes in the entire NBA. And then on the defensive end of the court, when you need a big stop, obviously you got Jaden McDaniels, who's a freak, but Anthony Edwards is unbelievable when you really, really, really need a stop and you need Anthony Edwards to lock in. That's a guy who I believe can do that. So this year he's averaging 29.3 points per game, 5 rebounds, 3.6 assists, and for his career he's averaging 24 a game, 5 and 4. And like I said, this year, shooting 50.4% from the field and 40.7% from the three-point line. So Anthony Edwards will be in MVP discussions at the end of this season. You can almost guarantee that, especially with injuries to Nikola Jokic, and guys missing time. Anthony Edwards is reliable. Every year he's played 79 games last year, 78, 79. So he shows up to play. He puts on a show, and he's steadily improved year after year. And that's why we love Anthony Edwards. That's why he's one of the most exciting players and one of our favorite players in the NBA, really on a night-to-night basis. And it's so fun to watch him go up against a player like Donovan Mitchell. You see that back and forth between the two, and especially because they're, like I said, they're the same position. So it's a lot of fun to watch those guys. And this Timberwolves team is going to be a problem. When you're looking at the Western Conference and how it's filling out, obviously we thought that Oklahoma City Thunder are going to be right there. They won the title last year. You imagine that they're going to be the favorites going into the playoffs this year, although they've played a little shaky as of late. But when you look at the rest of the West with Nikola Jokic's major injury, Spurs being so young and Wemby being in and out of the lineup, the Lakers, Rockets, how much do you trust, believe in both of those teams on a night-to-night basis and for 4 rounds in the NBA playoffs? I wouldn't say that I have a ton of confidence in either of those teams at this current moment. And with the way teams are built, you have to feel like the Timberwolves have a chance to be the second best team in this conference, which absolutely keeps you alive when you're talking about, can this team make the NBA Finals? And obviously, we think the team out of the West is probably going to beat the team that comes out of the Eastern Conference this season. There's there could be more trades that are coming down the pipeline. We just saw Trae Young get traded, which I think was the first trade of the entire season. Been a little slow on that part, but we'll see. A lot of your concerns about the Timberwolves would just be bench depth. And can you get production on a night-to-night basis from your bench if the starting lineup, one or two of those guys kind of have an off night? and you're 21st in the league in bench scoring. If we could get that a little higher, a little better, can they make one move before the trade deadline to help improve? You do have a young player in Rob Dillingham that a lot of teams like, and that the Timberwolves just haven't really. I don't know if he's not really being played or utilized, or they just don't see enough from him. But he could have some value on the trade market, and you could go try to get one of those veteran pieces. The Thunder went and got Alex Caruso, and we really think that added a lot of value to them. But just that level player that can come in and maybe play defense, hit some threes, and come off the bench for you, start if you need him to, would be so valuable to this squad in making the NBA Finals run that we believe that Anthony Edwards is going to make at some point. So that is all we got when it comes to tonight's game. These two teams do play again Saturday at 1 p.m. We'll be excited for that game. That one is back in Cleveland. Thank you for watching again. Don't forget to subscribe. It is much appreciated. Cyborg out.